Hello, my friend. This is a video on existential freedom in my series on existential freedom to mark the publication of my book, Beginning to Live, the Art of Existential Freedom. And this video is about Jean Paul Sartre, the French philosopher who became famous for creating a philosophical movement called existentialism. And Sartre had a very clear view on what freedom is and what it is not. He did not think it was a political right or a casual choice, but the very definition of human existence. He said, to be human is to be condemned to be free. Now that is quite a statement. How did he come to speak about it in that way? It was because he argued that for human beings and for human beings alone, existence precedes essence. In other words, you come to existence and live first, and in that process create what you become. So this is unique. When a craftsman creates a chair or a table, the concept of what he or she creates exists before they create the physical object. That object has a very specific purpose and cannot be anything else. A table is a table, a chair is a chair, a stone is a stone. Whereas human beings are born into the world without a predefined purpose. They do not have a soul or a destiny, Sartre says. We exist first, and only through the choices we make, sometimes not deliberately so at first, we define what we are, or rather what we become. There is no blueprint for a human being. The essence of a human being, the essence of the human condition is that it is wide open for each of us to interpret as we wish. But if we're not aware of that, then how can we do that? So that is really important. Sartre acknowledges that we aren't free to do anything we like. You can't choose to fly. You can't just flap your arms and be like a bird. You're always, however, free to choose your attitude towards the fact that you cannot fly. So he accepted facticity, the facts of life, the limits, the brute facts of life that determine what's possible and what isn't possible. Your birthplace, your body, your family, your past, previous decisions you've taken, all of that narrows down your choices. But your consciousness, your capacity to think about things and to open up your mind and to allow for possibility to return into your life allows you to become transcendent of these previous factual situations. You are never a waiter once and for all or exclusively in the way in which a stone is a stone and a rock is a rock and a table is a table. You are conscious of acting as a waiter and assuming the role of the waiter, but you can always alter that path or choose a completely different path. For Sartre, as there is no God and no objective morality written in the stars or in a book, we are the authors of our values. This is now Nietzschean ideas put into practice, and of course also an application of Heideggerian insights. So this leads to problems exactly as Kierkegaard described and Heidegger described. We feel abandoned. The realization that you are alone with no external authority, no God, no universal ethics guiding you, leaves you feeling stranded and on your own with a very big responsibility, and this leads to anguish. Here we have our anxiety again, our angst again, because of the overwhelming burden of having to decide and having to work out how to be in the world. It isn't easy, is it? So we are constantly choosing a template for our own life. But Sartre argued that as we choose the template for our own life, we are also choosing the template for human beings generally. So each action and each choice and each decision carries a weight of huge responsibility. Is it any wonder that we try to get out of that freedom? For Sartre, we are so scared of that freedom that most of us, most of the time, don't live in good faith towards that freedom, in openness towards our possibilities, but we live instead by closing that down in what he called bad faith, mauvaise foi. It is because absolute freedom is terrifying that we try to escape from it. It is to tell yourself that you are just this or that and cannot change or cannot be something else. That is bad faith, because it's never true, because you can change. Human beings are incredibly flexible and capable of changing their lives completely. Many people have proven that. If you tell yourself that you are not what you actually are, i.e. an openness, a consciousness which can make decisions and changes, then you are essentially lying to yourself by pretending you have no choice. And that's what people do. They lie to themselves and make themselves smaller than they are and stop themselves being brave enough to have that freedom. A person that says, I have to stay in this soul-crushing job because I have no other option, is a person in bad faith. They are pretending to be an object determined by circumstances rather than a free consciousness. The fact that taking your freedom to find a different job or migrate to a different country is going to be costly and difficult is what makes you claim that you can't do it. But actually you can. It's just a bigger effort than you are willing to make. Man is condemned to be free, said Sartre, because once thrown into the world, he is responsible for everything he does. And that is pretty much what Heidegger said too, but he says it in a more political way, in a more straightforward way, in a way that is challenging to people. Sartre's freedom calls you to your authenticity more so than Heidegger, because Heidegger was kind of making it sound as if authenticity was reserved for those who were in the know, and that's where he went to Nazism. Whereas Sartre went to communism because he believed that all of us are capable of authenticity, and that to accept your total freedom and to accept the nausea in the face of a world that is set in stone, or the anguish in the face of your responsibility, is necessary to take ownership of your life without making excuses. So, you slowly define what you become. It's still not an essence because it can always change, but you determine what you turn into. You sculpt your life out of what was given to you. In his later work, most of what I've been saying was in Being and Nothingness, and particularly summarized in his little book, Existentialism and Humanism. But in his later work, it became more sophisticated, but also more realistic, I think. And he shifted to writing more political books, especially critique of a dialectical reason, which was very much about how to live in a society, but also his psychological studies of two people. And each of these is a huge text of hundreds and hundreds of pages, 700 and 600, I think it is. So he wrote a study of Gustave Flaubert, the author, and that book was called The Family Idiot, and a study on Jean Genet, the playwright, called Saint Genet. And in this work, instead of showing that they were condemned to be free, he showed that they started out being determined by their history, their class, their family structures, and that those had totalized them into becoming something quite specific, and that they each had a lifelong struggle to liberate themselves from that totalization by their family and their society. So he speaks about lots of new concepts, for instance, about the practico-inert, which is for Sartre the way in which society becomes like stone-like, it becomes like structures that guide us and that direct us and that stop us in our track. The tools, the buildings and social systems created by previous generations stop our existential freedom. And that can become completely disabling. But there is always this dialectic, this possibility of setting our freedom against that determination. And then a dialogue begins between the individual's project to become something new and the crushing weight of historical necessity. So we release ourselves from seriality. We stop being a number, being part of a class, and we become part of a group infusion, which is a revolutionary way of thinking about it. It's not just about you as an individual, but you as part of a group that wants change. Flaubert, he showed, was the unloved child in a bourgeois family, but he created a historical moment by writing Madame Bovary and fighting with his bad faith to liberate himself. With Jean Genet, he wrote about this actor and martyr who had bought into the way others had looked at him as a thief, and he had accepted that, and then very slowly he had stopped being a free subject and had become an object for others. But Genet had a choice to reject the label or to assume it. And Genet famously chose the latter. I decided to be what they said I was. But then Sartre introduces the idea of liberation through the depth of alienation. Genet doesn't find freedom by being a good citizen. He finds it by being the most perfect thief and evil person possible. And this becomes his project. And out of that, he turns himself into a poet. He transcends the identity of thief by becoming a writer, and through literature he forces the bourgeois reader to see the world through his eyes, the criminal eyes, effectively reversing their power over him. This is very powerful writing in Flaubert and in Genet, showing that freedom is a circular struggle with the world around you, with a society that seeks to define you, but that you are the one internalizing their definition of you, and that you must find a way to reinvent yourself, using, however, the language society has given you. Sartre felt that Genet had succeeded in doing that, whereas Flaubert became a failure trapped in his neurotic repetition of what had been done to him. And as you probably remember, Madame Bovary is a very tragic story because of that. So Sartre's view was that the individual struggles against society, but also with society, and that we need to assume this challenge that life poses for us, to be aware that freedom is always situated, but you, my friend, can resituate it, and you can change the situation you are in and how you choose to live it and how to liberate yourself.